The Honourable Damien O'Connor.
Mr. Speaker, it's a pleasure to speak on this bill, and I won't take all my time. I know the good people of Mana and Porirua probably didn't come to listen to Nate, but nonetheless, they, along with the rest of New Zealand, will be really pleased to know that this is a very important bill, and it was with much pleasure that I listened to the National Party Minister say it, because going back 2.5 years ago, he and his friends in Federated Farmers were absolutely campaigning against national animal identification and tracing. And it is nice to have that the government, another road to Damascus experience here. This is very, very important, because what we have is a system, we will have a system once the Select Committee has carefully scrutinised this bill. And I have to say that Federated Farmers and others were, I guess, rightfully concerned that the system may bring in a huge bureaucracy. Now, I won't go into the detail of some of the clauses there, other than to say that they specify right down to the detail the kind of levies that might be imposed, and then search warrants and what might or might not happen with ministers of churches. So it is a very, very prescriptive piece of legislation. The principle, however, is one laid down by the last Labor government, and that in 2008, and I wish that my colleague, the Honourable Jim Anderton, was here to hear that minister's speech, because Mr Anderton indeed put this up to the industry and said we need animal identification and traceability to convince our trading partners that we have the highest quality and the safest food for them to buy, and that if there was any outbreak of a disease, then in fact we had a sound and robust system of identifying the animals, tracing them, knowing where they were, and then being able to minimise the spread of any disease, such as, and we don't even like to say it, foot and mouth disease. Something like that, potentially, yes, I said it, a potential cost of $10 billion to this economy. That is why it is so important to have the highest quality biosecurity systems. And unfortunately, the Minister failed to say in his speech that he had dumbed down biosecurity by cutting 54 frontline positions, which puts New Zealand at risk. But what's happening here is that we are now going about putting in place a system of identifying animals from birth right through until their death, knowing where they are, and if there's any problem with disease, then we know what the possible impacts or contacts with other animals or other farms might be. Mr Speaker, one of the questions that the Select Committee will be asking, and when we originally proposed this bill, we had made a commitment of $10 million to do our part, that's the government's part in this program. Of course, at that time, the National Party was encouraging Federated Farmers to oppose the system. And they opposed it on some vague kind of line that, well, we didn't know whether high-frequency or low-frequency receivers were the best way forward. That was the most sensible thing they said. The less sensible things were that we didn't need it. And Mr King was saying the same. All of the National Party members were saying it. We need traceability of our animals so we can convince our trading partners of the quality of our stock, of our food, of everything. And yet, for shallow political reasons, the National Party and Federated Farmers opposed it. No, the Minister knows that's true. Opposed it. And they now expect Labor to support this bill. Well, we will support it because it is the right thing to do. We knew that in 2008 and we were progressing this. Mr Speaker, I'm not going to, as I say too much more. The detail is in this big bill here. It effectively puts in place, and we hope, an electronic system that animals will be tagged, initially beef and deer. But I think sheep farmers should be warned too that they need to be part of the system. There's no doubt about that. And while we claim to be one of the best producers of quality food in the world, the reality is that most other pastoral and livestock producing countries actually have traceability systems in place, far better than ours. And so we really are playing catch-up here at the moment. And I know that the Select Committee under Mr Shane Ardern, who probably should be the Minister himself, he knows that, that we will deal with this bill very, very quickly and enable the system to be put in place. I note that a number of people who are on the stakeholder reference group, that's the group of people who are guiding this legislation, some of them were opposing the initial rollout of this, and Ian Corney himself, who was the Federated Farmers representative at that time, I think part of the organisation that opposed it, is now heading the stakeholder reference group and is passionately committed to having an animal tracing system in place. Mr Speaker, I hope that the technical issues of low frequency and high frequency ear tags and how best they might work into the future can be resolved. And in fact, though, the regulation making powers on the bill will determine ultimately the technical side of the system. In the meantime, though, as I say, the Labor Party will support it. I personally would like to see the next step that backs this up, and I know the Green Party will support us in that we need country of origin labelling, so that when we do impose the cost of $2 to $3 on the farmers, then they know they will get more than that value back through identifying their stock as quality stock, safe food when it goes into the marketplace. Mr Speaker, the Labor Party supports this bill, welcomes it into the House and acknowledges the great work done by the former Minister Jim Anderton to get it this far.
Honourable members, in accordance with a determination of